Okay, operations. There's two kinds, offensive and defensive. I'm going to discuss offensive first. Once you've gathered the intel, all you can gather, you draw up a operation plan, game plan, whatever you're going to implement. It combines combined warfare, usually ground elements and air elements. If you're near a sea, it also involves naval elements. I'm just discuss a ground operation. Um, if you're going on an offensive ground operation, you're going to use ground elements and air elements. And depending on your objective, either to attack an enemy army that's at a jump off point, or attack a enemy stronghold, town, garrison, whatever. The old school rule is a double envelopment operation, which means that you use limited forces as a frontal attack to distract the enemy, and use two flanking forces on your left and right. Those flanking forces are to compact the enemy's area, line of defense, push it in, keep on moving, and eventually encircle the enemy, whether it's a enemy army group, multiple army groups, or stronghold. Usually an operation is given a name. We'll just say Operation Typhoon, and it's given a code word of when to shoot, when to go. Code word could be anything, of Ticonderoga, whatever. It's something the enemy won't understand or be able to discern. The offensive operation first starts with the multi-arms elements of implementation, which usually involves long-range rocket strikes and heavy air pounding and bombing of the enemy installation or army group or garrison. Once you've pounded them enough, you're going to send in enough troops to think that the enemy's thinking you're going into a frontal attack. While he's concentrating on those troops moving forward, you have your right flank and left flank working each side, compressing that enemy into a smaller pocket and progressing rapidly. Well, eventually that pocket becomes a pocket. You're totally surrounded. You cut off your enemy's way of retreat. That means that the enemy's encircled in a pocket and can't do nothing but be compacted in area. Say the enemy has an area of 300 clicks by 150 clicks, 300 wide by 150 deep. Well, you want to make that eventually 100 clicks by 50 clicks deep, and have it so dense with what's left of the enemy in that dense pocket. And your ground troops kind of hold a standstill, and you do some more combined forces action, some more bombing once the pocket's smaller, and more rocket strikes, and you do your damage. Well, once that double envelopment has created that pocket and compacted that enemy pocket, the enemy has nowhere to go. They either have to fight their way out, fight a corridor out for a retreat. A breakout's what it's called. They have to fight their way through a breakout, or they're annihilated or surrender. Simple as that. That goes back to the combined arms tactics, which are never used. A German named Heinz Guderian, he called it the Blitzkrieg, and people misconceive that as tanks, but the Blitzkrieg is actually combined arms warfare. I mean, you're using tanks, infantry, artillery, air support, and naval support if you're within the sea area. Like I said, sometimes just to get to the enemy, you got to work your way there through pockets of resistance, create bridgeheads, cross rivers to get your ground units across, armored, motorized infantry, logistics, supplies, communications, divisional headquarters. You got to work your way closer and closer. Then your divisional headquarters will stand up, set up, and then you go to your Operation Typhoon, Ticonderoga, whatever you call it, and you exercise your game plan of compressing and compacting that enemy with a double envelopment and cutting him off from any retreat. He's not going to fight forward. He could break out on your flanks, either right or left. So you have to have your flanks echelon in depth, ready to prepare for breakout. He can break out to the rear, which is the most common practice. And you have to have your rear secure, echeloned in depth for a potential breakout. If they try to break out, you annihilate them every time they try, keeping them in that pocket. Tactics are involved, but I'm just talking offensive operations right now. And that's pretty much in conventional warfare. That's the best way to go about it, is a double envelopment attack, surrounding and compressing your enemy in a smaller and smaller pocket until the enemy force is either totally annihilated or they surrender. This nation has mostly done offensive operations. I can't really recall much defensive warfare operations been conducted besides maybe the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and World War I. Things changed in World War II. You had to adopt the new combined arms tactics, strategy, and operations of using combined arms warfare, which is meaning using your air support with your ground units, low flying air support, which means they're pounding ahead of what your tanks are getting ready to come up against. So your tanks are going to face less resistance once they get there. Then you have your motorized infantry following the armored column, and logistics following that, supply lines following that, with communications always kept at all times from the forward area to the rear and each flank to the rear. And operations, like I say, they change minute by minute, second by second, and you have to have the adaptability to change your operation on a dime, on a second's notice. And that goes back to lower officers of command, support, companies, platoon, squads, taking initiative when they see something to exploit and not sitting there and having to wait for orders to call in. If you see something you can exploit against the enemy, do it. But that's basically offensive operations. The main thing is a double envelopment, circle the enemy forces or garrison, compact the enemy forces garrison until they're crowded into an area where they're boxed in. They've got either they got to fight their way out or they're annihilated and or surrender. That's three options they have: is to fight their way out, be annihilated, or surrender. So offensive operations are there's a lot to it, but when Guderian invented combined warfare, it made offensive operations a heck of a lot more dangerous. They used to, line up and always frontal attack with the infantry, and then Guderian said, well, hey, we're going to have our tanks moving in with low-flying air support, followed by infantry to mop up or attack, singular infantrymen with anti-tank weapons that the tanks can't see or get. But offensive operations are very important, and they're a decisive factor. Let me just say that these Arab conflicts, those people, I did a tour in one. Those people have no concept of modern warfare. What we need to watch out for is the Soviet Union. That we're involved in NATO, and Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania are all NATO members. And NATO basically is if you pick on little brother Bobby, big Uncle Sam has to come to little Bobby's rescue, and you're fighting the whole family. That's NATO. That's an alliance. We started NATO. We have to honor that. And Putin is doing the same thing Joe Stalin did as far as spheres of influence and trying to retake land lost and USSR broke up. You don't really hear much about what he's doing because they always are reporting on Arab conflicts and terrorist cells. And hell, the terrorist cells are fighting each other over power. I mean, that's a lesser concern than the Russian bear. And the Russians just actually signed a non-aggression pact with China, making two formidable military nations as allies, similar to what Germany did with Japan in World War II. So that's more of a threat than anything. And it might involve offensive operations against Russia again, conventional. And I hate to say it, but the conventional will escalate. You end up going to tactical nukes and eventually WMDs. And then there's a plan called MAD, Mutual Assurance Destruction. And that basically means that WMDs, ICBMs, destroy the world. There'll be nothing left. But that was my little second educational thing on military operations, offensive. I'll talk about defensive tomorrow, and the wrap of operations, hopefully, and move on to tactics, which is on the lowest level, but one of the most important levels. And operations go to a tactical level sometimes. I think the American military needs to learn from the German military. They kept troops of the same area together, and those troops fought as a team, similar to a sports team. They knew each other. They knew each other well. They became friends. They were from the same area. And that's why they were effective. Plus they had effective commanders, officers, and they had generals at the front line of the battlefield, knowing minute by minute, second by second, the developing action on the operation, in the battle or the conflict happening. Somebody sitting at a desk in the back has no iota of what's happening up front, where the enemy's using his operational reserves to try to stem a gap that's been breached by your assault. And like I said, operations, there's two kinds, offensive, defensive. I try to explain offensive best I could. And like I said, either a enemy army rallying point, launch off point is one point you'd attack, because you know there's a mass amount of enemy military there. And the second offensive operation would be a garrison, a village made into a garrison, a town made into a garrison. You also try to take out any enemy air power you can simultaneously as the operation starts. That way, when you're bombing the enemy position and trying to compact that pocket, you're not ending up with dogfights in the air with other fighters and losing planes and losing that element of combined operations. And your bombers are basically free at will in the sky to bomb the area, the pocket at will. You know, you might have some anti-aircraft. I didn't mention that. Anti-aircraft units are part of the military too. They used to be flak guns. Now they're anywhere from surface to air missiles to handheld Stinger missiles, FHG-88 handheld surface to air missiles that'll take down a jet. But like I said, you wanna pound it before you even have your ground troops move in with the air. And then as your ground troops are moving in, armored columns first, you want to have low flying air support pounding what's in front of those columns to soften up the defense. And they try to attack forward, that you're going to use your operational reserve to bridge that weak spot, and your flanks are going to keep on working to make that circle, create that pocket, that double envelopment, and create that pocket, and then keep compressing that pocket, which will end up with either total enemy annihilation, surrender, or attempts by enemy to break out. So that's offensive operations in a nutshell, for the layman's term. For the couch general, I always call people watching football games couch quarterback. So I call people watching news on TV and say, they doing that? I call them couch generals. But how about I explain something about offensive operations? I'll discuss defensive operations, I guess, on my next blog. Enjoy your hump day. Have a good one.